The snow fell like silver dust over the kingdom, blanketing the dense pine forests and the jagged cliffs that bordered the Alpha King's fortress. Moonlight spilled across the frozen landscape, painting it in cold, mysterious tones. Wolves howled in the distance, their voices echoing across the mountains, a haunting melody for anyone who dared listen. Inside the fortress, the Alpha King, Cain, stood by the tall, frost-covered windows, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon. Tonight, his bride was arriving, a stranger sent from a distant land, a mail-order bride meant to secure the pack's future. He clenched his fists, tension radiating from his strong frame. Cain had ruled the pack for nearly a decade, his authority undisputed. Yet even he could not control the whims of fate. The woman he had agreed to marry was unknown to him, her face hidden behind letters and descriptions he had barely trusted. He did not know if she was clever or cowardly, loyal or deceitful, and yet something stirred in his chest, a cautious curiosity, tinged with unease. The fortress gates creaked open as a sleigh approached, drawn by two black horses whose breaths steamed in the frosty night. A hooded figure sat within, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The driver lifted the reins, and the sleigh glided toward the fortress courtyard, crunching softly over the snow. Cain's gaze narrowed. The guards tensed, hands resting on the hilts of their swords, eyes flicking between the stranger and their alpha. As the sleigh stopped, the woman stepped out. Her boots sank into the snow, leaving delicate prints behind. She lifted her hood, revealing hair the color of midnight, and eyes that shimmered like storm clouds. Cain felt a strange pull in his chest. She seemed fragile at first, slender and quiet, yet something in her gaze hinted at power hidden beneath the calm exterior. She moved with the grace of someone who had seen hardship and survived, someone who belonged in a world of danger even if it seemed she did not. "Alpha Cain," she said, her voice soft but steady, carrying a quiet strength that surprised him. "I am your bride." Cain's jaw tightened. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied her carefully. Every gesture, every movement, seemed deliberate, as if she were both curious and cautious, testing him as he tested her. "You will address the pack soon," Cain finally said, his tone controlled but carrying authority. "They will want to know you before I do." She nodded. "I understand." The guards parted to allow her into the fortress. As she stepped inside, Cain noticed how the animals in the courtyard reacted. Wolves and other creatures alike paused, sniffing the air around her. Even the fire in the torches seemed to burn brighter, casting shadows that flickered like living things. Cain felt a shiver run down his spine. Something about her presence was unusual, almost magical. That night, the fortress was quieter than usual. Snow drifted against the windows, and the wind whistled through the stone walls like a restless spirit. Cain walked through the corridors, leading the bride to her chamber. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting the pack's history, scenes of battles, hunts, and alliances with other clans. He watched her as she traced her fingers lightly over the embroidered wolves, her eyes reflecting a strange mixture of awe and recognition. "You know your way around strange places well," Cain said, his voice low. She looked at him, calm and unflinching. "I have learned to adapt." A silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Cain wanted to ask her about her past, about the life that had brought her here. But he knew better than to push too soon. Trust was a fragile thing in his world, and patience had saved him more times than brute strength ever could. That night, as she settled into the guest chamber, Cain could not sleep. He wandered the fortress halls, listening to the wind and the distant howls. He wondered what kind of bride would willingly come to a kingdom of wolves and magic, a place where danger was never far away. His thoughts kept returning to her eyes, which held both curiosity and calm determination. There was a fire there, quiet but undeniable. Morning came with a pale, cold light. Snow glittered like diamonds across the fortress courtyard. Cain gathered the pack in the great hall, introducing his bride to the leaders and warriors. Murmurs filled the room as everyone scrutinized the stranger. Many were skeptical, some wary, others simply curious. She spoke little, bowing respectfully, her hands folded before her. Yet even in her silence, she commanded attention. Wolves lowered their heads instinctively in her presence, and Cain saw the warriors exchange looks of surprise. The bride's aura was subtle, yet it radiated authority. Cain's heart thumped with a mixture of pride and unease. Pride because she had impressed the pack without effort. Unease because her power, whatever it was, remained a mystery. Over the following days, Cain observed her closely. She adapted quickly to the routines of the pack, learning their schedules, understanding their unspoken rules. She healed small injuries with herbs and whispered words that seemed to soothe even the most restless wolves. Cain noticed how her eyes would glow faintly in the moonlight, and how animals reacted differently to her presence, approaching without fear, calming when she was near. He began to understand that this bride was not merely a political arrangement. She possessed a hidden talent, one that could be crucial for the pack's survival. And yet, she remained enigmatic, revealing only what she chose to show. Then, one evening, as the full moon rose high, a violent magical storm swept over the kingdom. Lightning crackled across the sky, illuminating dark clouds swirling like spirits in the night. The pack howled in fear, retreating to the fortress for protection. Cain ran to the balcony, feeling the wind whip through his hair, snow stinging his face. The storm was unnatural, a dark force moving toward them, and even his strength could not hold it back. The bride appeared beside him, calm amidst the chaos. Cain looked at her, startled. "Stay back," he ordered. Though something in her presence made him hesitate, she smiled faintly. "I will not harm the pack. I am here to protect them." Before he could respond, she raised her hands, and a gentle glow emanated from her fingers. The storm seemed to bend around her, lightning dimming, wind softening. Wolves peeked from the fortress walls, their eyes wide with awe and recognition. Cain felt his chest tighten. He had not known fear like this since he faced the fiercest rival clans. And yet, he was not afraid of her. Instead, he felt a strange pull, a mixture of relief, fascination, and curiosity. As the storm faded, Cain turned to her. What are you?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. She looked at him with calm, unwavering eyes. "Someone who has come to stay," she said softly, almost enigmatically. Cain knew then that this was only the beginning. The bride was no ordinary woman. Her talent, her courage, and her presence would change everything for the pack. And perhaps, for him as well. That night, Cain stood on the balcony again, watching the stars reflected on the snow-covered landscape. The bride walked silently beside him. Neither spoke for a long while. Yet the silence was not empty. It was charged, heavy with unspoken promises and dangers to come. Cain realized that the pack's fate, and maybe his own, now rested in the hands of a woman he barely knew and yet could not stop thinking about. And in the distance, beneath the cold glow of the moon, shadows moved in the forest. Unseen eyes watched the fortress. An ancient magic had awakened, drawn by the bride's arrival. Cain did not yet understand the true depth of the threat, but one thing was certain. This Christmas, the Alpha King's life, and the pack, would never be the same. Snow still clung to the fortress walls, sparkling under the pale light of dawn. The Alpha King, Cain, moved through the corridors with quiet steps, his mind unsettled by the events of the previous night. The storm had vanished, leaving only frozen silence, but the memory of the bride standing against nature itself lingered. She had not just survived, it seemed she had commanded the storm, bending it to her will. That thought both fascinated and unnerved him. The bride, whose name he now knew as Alara, sat in the great hall, her hands folded over her lap. She studied a map of the kingdom, tracing routes with delicate fingers. Cain approached, leaning against the stone doorway, watching her carefully. Her calm presence was magnetic. The same calm that had bent the storm now seemed to radiate through the hall. settling the nervous pack members who gathered nearby. "Ilara," Kane began, his voice low but commanding. "The pack needs to understand who you are. You cannot remain a mystery." She looked up, her stormy eyes meeting his. "I do not intend to hide," she said softly. "But understanding takes time. And trust takes longer." Kane stepped closer. "Time is something we do not always have. Threats are not patient." Her gaze held his, steady and unwavering. "Then, we must prepare. And we must watch closely. For danger often comes from places we do not expect." That morning, Kane introduced Ilara to the daily routines of the pack. She moved among the wolves and warriors with a quiet confidence that startled many. She healed minor injuries with herbs and whispered words that seemed to calm both animal and human alike. Kane noticed how even the youngest wolves, usually restless and cautious, approached her without fear. It was as if they recognized something in her that he could not yet name. Some pack members were wary. "She is too quiet," one whispered to another. "Too careful. What does she hide?" Kane overheard, and his dark eyes narrowed. He did not answer their whispers, but he watched Ilara closely. She was indeed careful, but it was not deception. There was intelligence in her movements, patience in her speech, and an unspoken strength that quietly demanded respect. The next evening, Kane called her to the training grounds. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked side by side. Warriors sparred nearby, testing their strength and skill, but Kane's focus was solely on Ilara. "Show me," he said abruptly, his sharp voice cutting through the cold air. "Show me what you can do." Ilara hesitated, her eyes flicking to the sparring warriors. "You mean, in front of the pack?" "Yes," Kane replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If we are to survive together, they must know that you are not powerless." A faint smile curved her lips. She raised her hands slightly, and a subtle glow emanated from her fingertips. Kane felt a strange warmth ripple through him, not from heat but from something deeper, something ancient. The wolves nearby stopped mid-leap, tilting their heads as if sensing the energy in the air. Ilara extended her hands toward a wounded wolf lying on the ground. The wolf's fur, matted and frozen with ice, began to shimmer. Slowly, the animal stirred, eyes brightening, injuries mending as if time itself had softened. Kane's breath caught in his throat. The pack's strongest warriors stared in awe, and Kane realized for the first time that Ilara's talent was not simple magic. It was something rare, something that could shape life and protect it in ways he had never imagined. "Impressive," he said, his voice low and unreadable. Yet inside, a storm of emotions raged. Awe, curiosity, and a stirring of something more dangerous desire. Ilara lowered her hands, her glow fading. "It is not yet perfect," she admitted. "I must focus. Control is essential, or the energy can harm instead of heal." Kane studied her. "Then we will train. Together." Over the next few days, Ilara taught Kane and several trusted pack members how to sense the hidden currents of life, how to observe rather than force, and how to protect without endangering themselves. Kane watched her closely, fascinated by her intelligence and discipline. She was patient with the pack, gentle yet firm, and she commanded respect without raising her voice. But as her power became more apparent, jealousy and suspicion simmered among a few of the older warriors. They whispered of outsiders and unknown abilities, questioning whether Kane had made a mistake. Kane ignored them, but he did not dismiss the risk. He knew the world was harsh, and enemies could strike where least expected. Ilara's talents would need more than admiration. They would need protection, training, and trust. One evening, Kane found Ilara alone in the garden, tending to the frozen herbs she had brought with her. Snowflakes drifted gently around her, catching in her hair and making her look like a figure from a winter legend. He stepped closer, the crunch of snow beneath his boots announcing his presence. "You move through the pack as if you belong here," Kane said, keeping his tone calm. "Yet you are from far away. How do you reconcile that?" Ilara paused, brushing snow from a leaf. I have learned that belonging is not always a matter of place. It is a matter of choice and action. Kane's eyes narrowed. Action? And trust? Yes, she said softly, meeting his gaze. Both must be earned. And both must be given carefully. The wrong choice can destroy what we care for most. Her words lingered in the cold air, heavy with meaning. Kane felt a pull he could not explain. He was used to command, used to being the alpha, who led without question. Yet here, with Alara, he felt challenged not in strength, but in heart and mind. He was not used to being questioned, not in this way. And yet, he wanted to be. The next day, the pack faced its first test. A rival clan, envious of Kane's power and the rumors of a mysterious bride, sent a small group of intruders to the edges of their lands. Wolves barked warnings, and Kane immediately recognized the danger. He gathered the pack, and they prepared to defend their territory. Alara stepped forward, calm among the rising tension. Kane watched her closely as she moved to the wounded animals and sick members of the pack, her hands glowing faintly with her healing talent. When the intruders arrived, Kane led the warriors with precision. But he noticed how Alara subtly influenced the energy of the battlefield. Wolves ran with renewed strength, injuries healing faster than natural, movements almost in sync with her quiet commands. By the end of the skirmish, the intruders had retreated, confused and wary. Kane stood in the snow, watching Alara. The pack gathered around, respect shining in their eyes. The skeptics had been silenced not by force, but by her quiet, undeniable talent. Kane's chest swelled with pride, mixed with something else, something he had not admitted to himself. That night, as snow fell in soft waves, Kane and Alara stood on the fortress balcony, watching the moonlight glitter across the frozen landscape. The pack rested, safe for the moment, but Kane sensed that danger was far from over. "You have changed the pack," Kane said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "And perhaps you have changed me." Alara looked at him, her expression unreadable yet warm. "We change each other," she said softly, "and the world changes around us. That is how survival comes. Alpha Kane. Not by strength alone, but by understanding and trust." Kane's gaze softened. He wanted to say more, to reach out and close the distance between them, but he did not. There was a time for words, and a time for action, yet he could feel the bond growing, a quiet thread weaving between them, stronger than steel, yet delicate as the snow underfoot. And then, a howl echoed across the forest, different from the usual calls of wolves, dark and urgent. It carried a hint of unnatural magic. Kane stiffened, his instincts roaring to life. He knew that whatever threat had approached the pack before was not finished. It was returning, stronger and darker than before. Alara's eyes glimmered, reflecting the pale moonlight. She did not speak, but Kane could feel her resolve, her hidden power ready for the trials to come. He realized then that the bond forming between them was no longer just personal, it was vital to the survival of the entire pack. Cliffhanger. From the forest's edge, unseen eyes watched the fortress. A dark force stirred, ancient and relentless, drawn by the bride's hidden talent. Kane understood that the battles ahead would test not only strength, but trust, courage, and the fragile thread of love beginning to grow between him and Alara. And the first step of that dangerous journey was about to begin. Winter deepened over the kingdom, and the fortress lay blanketed in thick snow. Inside, warmth from roaring fires did little to calm the tension that lingered among the pack. Kane, the Alpha King, paced the great hall, his dark eyes fixed on the windows that framed the endless white forest. The rival clan that had tested them days ago had not disappeared. They lingered, plotting, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Alara moved among the pack silently, her presence both calming and unsettling. Kane could feel the way the wolves responded to her, how even the most stubborn warriors seemed to take notice of her subtle authority. Over the past week, her hidden talent had begun to show more clearly, small miracles, like healing injured wolves or calming tense spirits. Kane had watched, fascinated, as she quietly shifted the balance of the pack's energy, making them stronger and more united. But today, a larger test was coming. Cain sensed it in the biting wind and the unnatural silence that fell over the forest. The rival clan was returning, and this time, their attack would be full and merciless. The Alpha King gathered his pack in the courtyard. Snow crunched beneath heavy boots, and the air was sharp, biting at their faces. Cain's gaze swept over the warriors, lingering briefly on Alara. "This will be a battle for the pack," he said, his voice strong and commanding. "We stand together. Any who falter will face the consequences." Alara stepped beside him. "I will help where I can," she said softly, her eyes glowing faintly under the pale sunlight. Cain could feel the energy radiating from her. Subtle yet potent, like a quiet force that could shift fate itself. The rival clan's assault came at dusk. Shadows moved through the snow, swift and silent. Cain signaled, and the pack surged forward, a living tide of fur, claws, and teeth. Yet even as warriors clashed, Cain noticed Alara moving with purposeful calm, her hands raised subtly, guiding the flow of energy. Wolves struck with renewed precision, injuries mending faster than nature allowed. Cain realized she was doing more than healing. She was controlling the rhythm of the battle itself, shifting strength and vitality where it was needed most. He watched in awe as Alara moved to the center of the courtyard, facing a group of rival warriors who had broken through the front line. Her hands glowed brightly now, and a wave of energy radiated outward. The intruders froze. Their movements slowed as if the very air around them resisted their violence. Cain's chest tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. The bride he had doubted was now the pack's most powerful ally, and perhaps the only one capable of turning the tide. The battle raged for hours, but with Alara's subtle guidance, the pack gained the upper hand. Wolves that had been wounded recovered, spirits renewed. Cain himself fought alongside her, his movements precise and deadly, yet always in harmony with the energy she radiated. Together, they became more than Alpha and Bride. They became a single force, united in purpose and resolve. After the last of the rival warriors fled into the dark forest, Cain stood panting, bloodied but alive. Around him, the pack gathered, some injured, some wary, but all alive. Alara stood nearby, glowing faintly, her hands still raised slightly, as if holding the remnants of her energy. Cain approached her, awe and something deeper burning in his chest. "You saved them," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "You saved the pack." Alara's lips curved in a small, tired smile. "It was not just me. You led them well, and they fought bravely. I only helped, guided where I could." Cain shook his head. "No, you were the difference. Without you, many would have fallen tonight." The bond between them deepened, solidifying in the heat of battle. Cain realized he had been wrong to doubt her. The quiet, mysterious bride, who had arrived weeks ago, was not a pawn, nor a mere companion. She was a warrior in her own right, a force that could rival the strongest of the pack. As the night settled, Cain found himself walking beside Alara on the fortress balcony. Snow drifted gently around them, soft and serene, a stark contrast to the violence they had just faced. Cain's usual confidence was tempered now by a mix of respect, fascination, and a dawning feeling he had not fully acknowledged. Something like longing. "You have changed the pack," he said quietly, watching her profile against the pale moonlight. "And perhaps you have changed me." Alara turned to him, her stormy eyes meeting his. "We change each other," she said softly. "And that is how strength grows. Not through power alone, but through understanding, trust, and care." Cain felt a pull toward her, an urge to close the distance, to reach out and touch the warmth beneath her calm exterior. He restrained himself, knowing that the bond forming between them was delicate. Trust was not won in moments of passion, it was built in moments of courage, in shared danger, and in unspoken understanding. The fortress gates suddenly creaked, and Cain tensed. Wolves stirred in the snow-covered courtyard. A shadow moved at the edge of the forest, a dark figure. Watching. Waiting. Cain's senses screamed danger, a predator's instinct honed by years of leadership. "Elara," he said, his voice sharp. "Stay close. There is more to come." She nodded, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Cain felt her power radiate toward him, a shield of calm and energy. Even in the face of unknown threats, he felt reassured by her presence. That night, the pack slept uneasily, aware that the danger had not passed. Cain patrolled the fortress, checking on his warriors, but his thoughts kept returning to Elara. She moved silently among the pack, healing minor injuries, whispering encouragement, and maintaining a quiet strength that drew even the most skeptical warriors to her side. Cain realized that the bond forming between them was no longer simply personal, it was essential to the survival of the pack. Her hidden talent, once mysterious, had become a symbol of hope, a living force that could protect, heal, and strengthen them in ways Cain alone could not. The next morning, the sun rose pale and cold, casting long shadows across the snow. Cain and Elara stood on the balcony, watching the forest edge where the rival clan had disappeared. "They will return," Cain said, his jaw tight. "And next time, they will not be as easily defeated." Elara's eyes softened, yet a quiet determination burned within them. "Then, we must prepare," she said, "together. And we must teach the pack to trust not just their strength, but their instincts and each other. My talent alone cannot protect them forever." Cain nodded, the weight of leadership pressing on him. Yet for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope. With Elara at his side, they could face not only enemies but the darkness that haunted their land. The curses, the rival clans, and whatever ancient magic still lingered in the forest. As the day passed, Cain and Elara trained together, refining her abilities and integrating them into the pack's routines. Warriors watched, learned, and grew stronger. Cain realized that trust, like strength, was contagious. Under Elara's guidance, even the most hesitant wolves began to act with confidence, their fear replaced by renewed courage. By nightfall, the fortress was quiet once more. Cain and Elara stood together on the balcony, snowflakes drifting gently around them. He felt a connection growing, something neither spoken nor forced. It was not yet love, not in the way stories described it, but it was a bond, forged in fire, snow, and unyielding trust. And then, in the silence, a faint hum of dark energy stirred at the edge of the forest. Cain sensed it immediately, a shadow of ancient power, watching, waiting. He knew that the bride's hidden talent had drawn attention, not just from enemies in the flesh, but from forces older and more relentless. Cliffhanger. From the darkness beyond the trees, something moved, a whisper of magic, a pulse of power that made the very air hum with danger. Cain realized that even with Elara's talent, the battles ahead would demand more than strength. They would demand courage, unity, and trust that neither had yet fully tested. And as he looked at her, he understood that their fates were intertwined in ways neither could escape. The wind howled through the snow-laden forest like a chorus of restless spirits. The Alpha King's fortress stood firm against the icy storm, but even its tall walls could not fully protect the pack from the growing darkness. Cain stood at the balcony, his cloak whipping around him as he stared into the forest's edge. The shadows there seemed alive, swirling with energy that made the hairs on his arms rise. Beside him, Elara's presence radiated calm, yet Cain could feel the tension in her hands, the energy coiling beneath her skin. She had grown stronger in the weeks since her arrival, her hidden talent now more controlled, more potent. But Cain knew that even her abilities had limits, and the force stirring in the forest was unlike anything they had faced before. "The curse," Cain said, his voice low and steady, though his heart thudded in his chest. "It is awakening, stronger than we imagined." Ilara nodded, her stormy eyes reflecting the moonlight. I can counter it, she said softly. But it will take everything I have. And more. Kane's gaze sharpened. Then we will face it together. The pack, you, me, we survive as one. Nothing else matters. The pack gathered quickly in the great hall, tense and wary. Wolves padded silently, ears alert, eyes flicking toward the darkened windows. Warriors gripped their weapons, prepared for battle, but Kane could see the fear in their eyes. He knew they trusted him, but the shadow moving in the forest carried a magic older than any of them. Ilara stepped forward. This is not a battle we can fight with strength alone, she said. We must focus. We must act as one. The energy I hold can protect the pack, but I cannot do it alone. You must trust me completely. Kane met her gaze. I trust you, he said, his voice firm. I have no choice but to trust you, and I would follow you anywhere. A faint smile curved her lips, fleeting and soft, but it carried warmth. Then we begin, she said, raising her hands. Outside, the forest seemed to shiver. Shadows moved closer. Dark energy twisting and snapping like lightning across the snow. Kane signaled the pack to form a protective circle around the fortress courtyard. Ilara took the center, her hands glowing with an ethereal light. The wolves stood close, sensing her power and drawing courage from it. Kane stepped beside her, his presence solid and unwavering. The first wave of the curse struck a black mist that twisted and writhed, coiling like serpents across the snow. Kane's warriors fought, but the shadows were relentless, moving with a strange intelligence. Wolves barked, and the air hummed with energy, thick and heavy. Kane knew that if the mist touched the pack, it could corrupt their minds, drain their strength, or worse. Ilara's voice rang out, calm and commanding. Hold, focus your energy. Trust me. A radiant light burst from her hands, spreading across the courtyard. The black mist recoiled as if burned by her presence. Kane felt the warmth of her power, like sunlight cutting through a frozen sky. He joined her, lending his strength, guiding the pack as they moved in unison. Every action, every step, felt synchronized, like a dance of life and energy. Hours passed. The battle raged, the snow swirling with light and shadow, power and determination. Kane watched Ilara, awed by her courage. Her hidden talent was more than magic, it was life itself, a force that mended, protected, and strengthened. The wolves, inspired by her, fought with renewed vigor, their movements precise, almost instinctive. And then, the final surge came. The curse, ancient and angry, took shape a massive shadow, taller than any wolf, darker than the night itself. It towered over the pack, its energy crackling like a storm. Kane stepped forward, placing himself between the shadow and Ilara. We face this together, he shouted, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Ilara's hands glowed brighter than ever. Together, she echoed. She stretched her energy outward, weaving it like threads of light around the shadow. Kane felt a shiver run through him as the darkness fought against her, clawing, twisting, resisting. But Ilara did not falter. The light grew, brilliant and unyielding. Kane joined his strength with hers, lending courage, presence, and focus. Slowly, agonizingly, the shadow began to falter, twisting and dissipating under the combined power of Alpha and Bride. The wolves surged forward, driving the remaining darkness back into the forest. Finally, silence fell. The snow drifted softly, falling like a gentle blessing. The fortress courtyard lay quiet, the pack exhausted but alive. Kane lowered his arms, breathing heavily, his gaze finding Ilara. She stood, glowing faintly, her hands trembling from the effort. You did it, Kane said, awe and relief mixing in his voice. Ilara smiled softly, her energy dimming but still warm. We did it, she corrected him. Together. Always. Together. Kane stepped closer, his dark eyes searching hers, I doubted you when you arrived, he admitted. I thought you were fragile, powerless. But I see now that I was wrong. Completely wrong. Her lips curved faintly, a mixture of pride and amusement. Power is not always what it seems, she said softly. Strength is not always seen in battle alone. Cain reached out, taking her hand in his. The touch sent a warmth through him that snow, fire, and even magic could not match. He felt the bond between them, forged in danger, trust, and shared purpose. This was no ordinary marriage of convenience. This was partnership, trust, and the beginning of something neither could have predicted. The pack began to gather around, eyes filled with respect and admiration. Wolves approached Alara without fear, brushing against her legs, seeking her warmth and guidance. Cain looked at the pack and realized that she had not only saved them but transformed them. Confidence replaced hesitation. Unity replaced doubt. The bride who had arrived quietly weeks ago was now the heart of the pack. As night fell, Cain and Alara stood on the fortress balcony, snowflakes drifting gently around them. Silence stretched, filled only with the soft murmurs of the pack resting inside. Cain looked at her, words failing him. You are extraordinary, he said finally, voice low but steady. Alara's eyes met his, deep and stormy, reflecting moonlight and something softer, something personal. So are you, she whispered. The Alpha King, who leads with strength, and yet allows trust to grow. For a long moment, they stood together, sharing the silence, the snow, and the unspoken feelings that had grown between them. Cain knew that the battles were not over. The curse had been driven back, but not destroyed. The shadows still lingered, and other threats would come. But for now, they had survived. Together. And then, a soft breeze carried a faint whisper across the balcony, almost like a voice from the forest itself. Cain stiffened, instinct warning him that the darkness had not fully retreated, but Alara's hand in his gave him courage. Whatever was coming, they would face it as one. Cain drew her close, and for the first time, he let himself feel the depth of the connection that had grown between them. We face everything together, he said, his lips brushing her hair. Alara leaned against him, her hands resting on his chest. Together, she repeated. And for the first time, Cain allowed himself to believe it, not just for the pack, but for them. The snow fell softly around them, a silent blessing in a world of chaos. Wolves howled faintly in the distance, a song of victory and unity. The Alpha King and his bride stood together, radiant in moonlight and warmth, knowing that they had survived the darkness, and that they would face the future side by side. Even as the distant shadow lingered at the edge of the forest, Cain no longer felt fear. He had found a partner, a guide, and perhaps, in time, something more. And Alara, the bride with the hidden talent, had not only saved the pack but transformed their world, and his heart, forever.